There will be nothing like it. Open the effing strait. How dare you speak that way on Easter morning to the country? Who do you think you are? You're tweeting out the F word on Easter morning? You'll be living in hell, as if hell is a place. Hell is a condition, and this is an example of that condition. Just watch. Praise be to Allah. So obviously you're mocking the religion of Iran. Okay, if you seek a religious war, that's a good idea. But by the way, no decent person mocks other people's religions. You may have a problem with the theology. Presumably you do if it's not your religion, and you could explain what that is. But to mock other people's faith is to mock the idea of faith itself. And we should never mock that, because at its core is the acknowledgement that we are not in charge of the universe. We did not build it. We won't be here at the end of it.
In this video, Tucker Carlson takes direct aim at Donald Trump over what he calls dangerous and deeply troubling comments made in the middle of an active war with Iran. This wasn't the quiet diplomatic statement. On Easter Sunday, one of the holiest days in the Christian calendar, Trump posted a message threatening to destroy civilian power plants and bridges in Iran. Tucker Carlson makes the case that these aren't just aggressive words. They're threats to commit war crimes against ordinary people who had no say in starting this conflict. He goes further, arguing that the United States is being steered toward a global catastrophe, one that could involve millions of deaths, widespread famine, and, most alarmingly, the use of nuclear weapons. And throughout it all, Carlson raises a deeply uncomfortable question about whose interests are actually driving these decisions.
Not to be bitter, it was open on February 27th and had been for, since there were pirates roaming the strait. For modern history, it had been open. Now it's closed because of this war. Okay, so there's that. But leave that aside. Okay, that was then. How do we get it open? Conventional airstrikes will not open the strait. So if you reach the end of your conventional power, where does that leave you? Nuclear weapons. And the effects of that hardly need to be explained. Well, they can't be fully known because modern nuclear weapons have never been used. But you can just draw obvious conclusions, like life in Iran, not possible. So you wipe out a country of 92 million people. What about directly across the Persian Gulf? What about the 7 other countries? All of them allies of the United States, the biggest oil producing countries in the world. Could you live there? What about the 100-odd million people who live in those countries? Maybe not possible for them either. Would a nuclear strike be followed by peace? Probably not. The US isn't the only country in the world with nuclear weapons. You could have a global nuclear war. That's why we haven't used nuclear weapons in 80 years. No one has, because you don't know where it goes from there. This is insane. Okay? This is insane. Open the fucking strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah. Now, a lot of people reading that imagined, of course, this can't be real. Did the president of the United States really just write that? And it is real. It is maybe the most real thing this president has ever done, and also the most revealing. On every level, it is vile on every level. It begins with a promise to use the U.S. military, our military, to destroy civilian infrastructure in another country, which is to say to commit a war crime, a moral crime against the people of the country, whose welfare, by the way, was one of the reasons we supposedly went into this war in the first place. They're being killed by their government. We have to rescue them. And now here's our president, not even a month and a half into the conflict, which we are not winning, by the way, because the Straits of Hormuz are not open. There's one way to keep track. That's the measurement. Saying that we're going to use our military to kill the civilians of this country who didn't choose the war. They got nothing to do with it. They're like civilians everywhere. Blow up their bridges? Bridges on military bases? No, just bridges. Bridges that people cross every day to go to school and work and to worship. And yes, church, because there are over 1 million Christians in Iran. This is their Easter too. And power plants. Not the power plants attached to missile factories, okay, but civilian power plants in a country of almost 100 million people. What happens when a modern country, and a country that has a nuclear program is a modern country, Iran is a modern country. What happens when it loses power? Well, people die. Babies connected to incubators die. People in hospitals die. And those are the first level effects. And then people begin to starve. And then you have refugee crises. People leave the cities looking for food. And then, yes, they move into other countries. In the region, in Europe, in the United States, you cause chaos and death, mass suffering and death when you do that. And we have done that. We have intentionally bombed civilian infrastructure in Iran. It's totally unacceptable. Not under the phony laws of some international body, but under moral law. God's law, killing non-combatants, people who did nothing wrong, who didn't choose this war.
Tucker Carlson opens with a fact that cuts through the war rhetoric. The United States is not winning this conflict. The entire strategic purpose of this military campaign was to keep the Strait of Hormuz open for global trade. It is still closed. That is the one metric that matters, and by that measure, nothing has been achieved. Yet, rather than reassessing the strategy, Donald Trump is now publicly calling for the destruction of civilian infrastructure, bridges that people use to get to school and work, and power plants that keep hospitals running and homes lit across a country of nearly 100 million people. Tucker Carlson is clear about what happens when you knock out a civilian power grid in a modern nation. The lights going out is the least of it. Babies on incubators die. Life support systems fail. Food supplies collapse, triggering starvation. And then comes the refugee wave, people fleeing destroyed cities, moving into neighboring countries, and eventually reaching Europe and the United States. This isn't a side effect of the strategy. It is the strategy, and Carlson rightly calls it what it is, under both international and moral law: targeting non-combatants, a war crime. Worth noting too, Iran has over 1 million Christian citizens. Easter was their holiday as well. The people Trump is threatening to cut off from power are not faceless enemies. They are families. And Israel's role in shaping these targeting decisions is a question that cannot be ignored.
Shouldn't do that. You'll be punished for it, in this life or the next, or maybe both. For the president to say that and not bother to tell us, oh, it was an accident we did this? Well, one, it makes you reassess the bombing of the girls' school attached to the IRGC naval base, where the children of Iranian military officers were incinerated. Every person has assumed that was a mistake. No American could ever believe the U.S. government would do that on purpose. I still don't believe it. But after this, you have to kind of wonder, how did that happen? Was it bad targeting, coordinates given to us, we hope, by Israel, another country? Maybe it wasn't. Who knows at this point? For the president to call for that, it's worth stopping and saying, no, this is not acceptable under any circumstances. You haven't justified it. You couldn't justify it. And it can't be done in our name.
Tucker Carlson raises a point that, once heard, is difficult to set aside. A girls' school connected to an IRGC naval base in Iran was bombed. The children killed there were the daughters of Iranian military officers. At the time, the assumption was that it had to be a mistake, a targeting error, perhaps bad coordinates passed along by a third party. No one wanted to believe the United States government would deliberately incinerate children. But after Trump's public call to destroy civilian infrastructure, Carlson asks the question that few others are willing to voice. What if it wasn't a mistake? When a sitting president openly calls for bombing bridges and power plants, civilian systems, not military ones, the line between accident and intent starts to blur. Carlson's argument isn't that we know it was deliberate. His argument is that we can no longer simply assume it wasn't. He also challenges the idea that any of this destruction is strategically rational. No serious analyst believes that bombing bridges reopens the Strait of Hormuz. The strait is blocked because of naval and missile capabilities, not infrastructure. So if the goal isn't strategic, what is it? Carlson suggests something far more disturbing, that the appeal is the exercise of power itself, the ability to destroy, simply because the capability exists. This gets worse when you factor in the timing. Trump posted these threats on Easter morning and ended the message with, "Praise be to Allah," a phrase used sarcastically to mock the people of Iran, and in doing so, to mock the concept of faith itself. Carlson makes clear this wasn't clever political messaging. It was an insult to every person of any religion who holds faith as something sacred. Easter is a celebration of life. To use it as the backdrop for threatening mass civilian death is not just poor judgment. It is, as Carlson puts it, a desecration. Then there is the math. The Strait of Hormuz region supplies roughly 30% of the world's fertilizer and 20% of its energy. A prolonged closure doesn't just inconvenience Western economies, it triggers famine in Africa and economic collapse across the developed world. Carlson's warning is that the people driving these decisions, likely shaped by Israel's strategic agenda, are not accounting for these consequences. Or worse, they are accounting for them and proceeding anyway. And if conventional military force continues to fail, what comes next? Carlson spells it out, plainly. The only escalation remaining is non-conventional: nuclear weapons. A nuclear strike on Iran doesn't stay in Iran. Radiation spreads across the Persian Gulf, threatening the very US allied nations the region depends on. And it doesn't stop there. Other nuclear-armed states, Russia, China, do not sit out a nuclear exchange. There is no version of this that ends with a US victory. There is only a version that ends with a destroyed world. That is why no nuclear weapon has been used in combat in 80 years. Every nation that possesses them has understood that you cannot control where it goes once it starts. Carlson's conclusion is stark. We are being led in a direction that has no good ending by leaders who appear either unwilling or unable to see where the road they are on actually leads.